Well, hello again, and first of all, a quick little update from here at Newcastle's training ground, where I've just been speaking to Eddie Howe inside the press conference room ahead of tomorrow's game down at Manchester United. And yeah, one player who won't be out there on the training pitches behind me is Sandro Tonali. He's been spotted on the streets of Gosforth walking his dog this morning, and that's where I'll be shortly. And to be honest with you, there's quite a few who won't be out there training today. I'll bring you more on that in just a second. Okay, see you soon, guys. So here we are on Elmfield Park, walking down towards Elmfield Road, where Sandro Tonali was spotted earlier having a stroll with his dog. Now, why wasn't he at the training ground with us, guys? Well, he's not allowed to be at the moment. Confirmation of his 10-month ban, of course, came last week. Newcastle did believe and do believe he will be allowed to train with them during the suspension, but as of yet, while they haven't got clarity on that, he's got to stay away, and he's getting his exercise in by walking his dog there. And to be honest with you, Newcastle's squad at the moment could run a bit of a doggy daycare session, because Alexander Isak, Sven Botman, another who've been pictured with their canines, they're both out injured as well. And on Botman, it was a question I asked of Eddie this morning. Now, when Botman first suffered the knee injury about 4 weeks ago, we were told he'd be out for a couple of weeks. Then after the international break, it was clear that wouldn't happen. I got word of it being some sort of setback, which is why I asked Eddie this morning what was, I asked for clarity on that, and Eddie said, no, there is no return date, to which I said, could he become one of your, quote, long-term absentees? And Eddie's response was, well, yes, perhaps. We haven't quite yet determined what the issue is, and while they're investigating, there is no return date for Sven Botman, and that is a huge blow to add to all of the others. And I'm going to come on to shortly what I think of Newcastle's summer transfer business, with hindsight and with foresight as well. I've got a little bit to say on that, and I've written a piece on it for tomorrow's Daily Mail. But for now, to bring you the news from this morning, I just detected from Eddie that he's been hit for six a little bit by this. There wasn't really an attitude of, we're going to adopt a siege mentality and come out fighting, which of course they will down at Old Trafford. They will, we know what these guys are as characters, but I did just get the impression there this morning that Eddie was reeling a little bit, especially on the back of the news of Sven Botman, Jacob Murphy's shoulder injury, which is a freak occurrence, going back to Harvey Barnes, the foot injury. You've got on top of that Isak, Elliot Anderson with what sounds like a nasty back injury as well. So all of this combined, Eddie has got six players who could potentially be starters, who are going to be missing until at least the next international break, it looks like, and beyond. So yeah, who is going to come in? Well, down at Manchester United tomorrow, and this again was a question I asked of Eddie, what are you going to do at centre forward? Because you've been left with Callum Wilson as someone who... Now, Eddie hasn't got lucky. I think credit is due here that from the Carabao Cup final on, Wilson and Isak have existed together. They've rotated, they've both played well, they've at times had to make do with being an impact substitute, but it's worked. Now, it's worked in terms of keeping them both fit and in form. The last few weeks, it hasn't really, we've seen Wilson just come back from a hamstring injury. Isak now has a groin problem, as we revealed on Mail Sport last week. He's going to be out for the next 3 or 4 weeks. So it leaves a player in Wilson who can't play 3 games a week. That is why Eddie deserves applause for keeping him largely fit for the best part of 8-9 months. So down at Wolves on Saturday, Wilson scored 2 goals, but I must admit I thought he looked a little more like the player we had seen post-World Cup, where it took him quite a while to get back up to full speed. I thought he looked a little clunky at times, and I think Wilson is an absolutely wonderful player, but he does go through these spells where he doesn't necessarily look 100%, and I thought that was the case on Saturday. So yeah, down at Manchester United tomorrow, I said, well, what are you going to do? Was this something you thought of during the summer, the eventuality whereby one of Wilson or Isak would get injured? And he said, well, that's why we signed Anthony Gordon. Of course, that was back in January, and I fully expect to see Gordon used through the middle at Old Trafford tomorrow. Now, what happens if Wilson then does pick up an injury in the next couple of the games are coming thick and fast? Well, you're left with a winger as your central striker, and Eddie said it comes back to resource. They couldn't sign all the players they wanted to, which is what I'm going to come on to in a second, because yes, okay, resource is limited, but you've got to go out and sign what you absolutely need, and I think Newcastle's business wasn't necessarily what they did absolutely need. So yeah, they are going to be short tomorrow night. Now, if he's looking for bodies to come in, I'm going to show you a quick little video now, especially if this tie tomorrow goes to penalties. Now, I've just got back from a few days away in Barcelona with my wife and my 3 little boys, and we went out with the new camp to see the stadium. I must admit, the stadium tour, if you are going to go over there, it's very good, the immersive tour, but it's a lot of money for not actually getting inside the new camp, which has been renovated now, not seeing the dressing rooms, not seeing the pitch. But at the end of it, this is what we really liked. You do get a shot at the robo keeper, which is Marc-André ter Stegen. Now we queued for an hour to take our shots. I must admit, after 10 minutes, I was ready to leave the queue, but tried telling that to a 5 and 7 year old in the Barcelona strips. Anyway, during an hour, nobody scored. You know, the technology on the keeper, I have to say, to read the shot where it's going is quite impressive. And then I stepped up, and this happened. I hope you noticed there how it actually took the breath away of some of the crowd members. Yeah, there was real appreciation from our strike. But so Eddie, if you do need a penalty taker tomorrow night, I can be subbed on from the press box later on. So there you go. Now on the museum, I said it was great for a 5 and 7 year old, not so much for a 2 year old. Yeah, he was more interested in trying to smash a glass case which held Hristo Stoichkov's football boots from sort of the early 90s, which I thought was a little bit disrespectful. Yeah, I need to sit him down in front of videos of USA 94 instead of Mr. Tumble, don't I? But that will come all in good time. I have to say, I'm turning this into more of a travel guide than a football update. Barcelona, absolutely tremendous city. My boys loved it. We're lucky enough to be staying in the place. I'll put these pictures on screen now. It had a football pitch in the back garden. So yeah, we embarked on a week of warm weather training, which was great fun. Like I said, Spain will be a great country when it's finished. There's just half-built walls and buildings everywhere, but what they do very well is football, and that culture runs through the entire city really. Everywhere you go, just Barcelona everywhere really. Even watched it was El Clasico when we were there at the weekend. We watched that in a bar with the locals, which was great. And then afterwards we hung around and we watched Newcastle v Wolves, which wasn't so great. And I mean that in that I think they've done well to come away with a draw. I thought at times the performance was, and albeit you're watching it from afar, wrestling with little kids, at times it looked like Newcastle were limping a little bit. Now that I mean that, you know, mentally as much as physically. Now this is something which was refuted today by Eddie Howe. It was put to him that Alan Shearer had said on Match of the Day that his team were tired. Eddie rejected that. He said yes, they were tired down at West Ham a few weeks ago, but he didn't think they were at Wolves on Saturday. I don't know. I just think I thought they were starting to look stretched. When you've got a player like Kieran Trippier who has been as good as he has, and he had an off day on Saturday, I thought, from what I saw. When you've got him playing that way, I think you've got to bring it back to the load and to the games, which brings me on to the point I want to make about the summer transfer business. Now Newcastle, it was a net spend of close to £100 million, £150 million committed all told, bearing in mind the Lewis Hall money was deferred until next summer. Now I've just written for the Daily Mail there that even with foresight, and this was at the time when the window closed, there were questions asked about the transfer business. And this goes back to, I was at the Time Theatre last week in Newcastle when Kevin Keegan shared a stage with Eddie Howe, and Kevin said what he always has done, and I've always bought into this: buy better. Eddie was sat next to him right there on the stage. Buy better than what you've already got. That way squad depth takes care of itself. The examples he quoted, to name but a few, because Kevin always did try to buy better, were Andy Cole and David Ginola. Now David Ginola came in and displaced Scott Sellers, who was a very good player for Newcastle. Andy Cole came in, David Kelly and Gavin Peacock, goodbye. It was ruthless, but Kevin got it right, and he took Newcastle to where they wanted to. Did Newcastle buy better in the summer? I don't think they did. And the one player who was supposed to be an improvement, who was the Champions League pedigree player, was going to come in, was Sandro Tonali at £52 million from AC Milan. Now, that hasn't worked out for reasons away from football. We've spoken about that a lot in previous weeks. What a disaster the ban really is, bearing in mind where Newcastle are at the moment. But even before all of that, you lost his place in the team to Sean Longstaff, the man he was supposed to replace. So the narrative had shifted to Tonali needing time, which is fair. That's okay. Newcastle didn't have time. This was their first Champions League campaign in 20 years. They had to buy for today, not tomorrow. Which brings us on to the three other signings. First of all, the two young fullbacks, Tino Livramento and Lewis Hall. They could be tremendous buys, wonderful buys. They may well be England starters at Euro 2028. That doesn't help Eddie Howe now. It didn't help him on Saturday down at Wolves when they were both unused substitutes. And I've likened it in the piece to, it feels almost like they've invested in cryptocurrency. Now, yes, it might pay dividends tomorrow or next season, but the immediate need in terms of the workload this season, and to alleviate that on a group of players who did so tremendously well last year, it was for now. And I just don't think they did that. It goes back to what Kevin said. If you buy better, it filters down. All of a sudden, the starters from last season become substitutes and you get squad depth that way. That brings us on to Harvey Barnes. Now, Harvey Barnes is a wonderful addition. And listen, the injury aside, injuries can happen. I've got no quarrel or complaint over the injury. That was a freak thing. But even before that, you look at Barnes and you think, well, is he better than Anthony Gordon? Well, on the first evidence, the first few weeks of the season, no, he couldn't get in the team. And yes, it's a luxury. It's very nice for Newcastle to be able to go out and spend £38 million on Barnes. Of course, it's very nice to buy 2 fullbacks for the future to start the succession plan already. Rainy day thinking. But rainy day thinking's all very well and good at the moment. It's absolutely raining, chucking it down, matches and injuries, and Newcastle are getting soaked. And I just look at that summer business and the impact it's made. Newcastle could not have expected from the £150 million committed for at this stage of the season for their 4 signings to have made only 12 starts between them. As I say, the gambling and the injury issues, okay, but even before that, there was they hadn't impacted like I think Newcastle expected them to do. So it's left Eddie Howe now relying on the players of last season, and yes, they are very good players. They are good characters. But I just think they're starting to feel a little stretched and a little tired now. Which brings us back to the question I asked of Eddie this morning when Eddie in his answer said to me, well you're alluding to us signing a third striker. Well, which I was, kind of. And he said, money was tight, we couldn't do that. Well, if money's tight, I think you've got to spend it in different areas. It was something I said at the start of the summer. It was something I wrote even 3 or 4 weeks ago. And I just think not necessarily the squad, but the starting 11, the strongest 11, hasn't been strengthened to the degree that it should have done, really, going into what was such a key, pivotal season in the club's history. Now, going down to Old Trafford tomorrow night. Now, I don't think Newcastle can lose, and by that, I make the point that I made before Manchester City. If they do lose, well, okay, they're out of the competition. It's one free week in 3 or 4 weeks' time that they could probably do with, bearing in mind all the issues we've spoken about, so it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. But then if they win, they've eliminated one of the favourites. They're through to the last 8, and all of a sudden they're only 2 games away from Wembley. And who knows what the fitness picture will look like down the line when they do get to those very latter stages. So yeah, I am going down there. I don't think it's quite got the same level of excitement and enthusiasm for supporters and those on the inside as it did on the back of the victory over Manchester City and the draw immediately afterwards, which sent them down to Man United. But nonetheless, how can you not look forward to a game down at Old Trafford? I was actually there in 2013 when Johan Cabaye scored that goal for 1-0. Of course, the only time they've won there in the last half a century. So what is Eddie going to do in terms of the team? Well, yeah, we expect changes as much as he can make changes. Something he did hint at today was going to a back 3. Now that would, if he went to a 3-4-3, that would allow him to take one of the 3 midfielders out and perhaps play Hall and Livramento as the 2 wing backs. Front, again, I mentioned this earlier, we expect to see Anthony Gordon through the middle and Callum Wilson rested, which I do think is the right decision, but also brings home the point I've made previously about Newcastle in the summer. Did they sign what they really needed, or was the window a little bit luxurious? Was it the behaviour and the spending of a club who was in perhaps a stronger position than what they were and what they are? I think it just might have been, but anyway, I don't want to sound too negative, because what I think in terms of the manager, the players, they're still in a good, strong place. But just the last couple on the back of Dortmund, and then the nature of some of what we saw down at Wolves has brought some of these questions into focus, and I think it's fair and only right that we do talk about them. Anyway, that's enough for now. Like I say, I'll be down there tomorrow night. Please click on the links in the description below. So yeah, guys, I'll see you again in around 24 hours time. Keep on watching. Please hit like. Please hit subscribe, and I hope you enjoyed my little travel update on Barcelona. If you want more of that, I'm always willing. I do enjoy it. Okay, guys, see you soon. Bye bye.